The lights in the office blurred into a dull haze as Ethan Cole stared at his computer screen, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat he couldn't keep up with. His body ached, his head felt heavy, and his chest carried the familiar weight of exhaustion he no longer tried to explain. Deadlines, clients, late nights, those were the reasons he gave everyone. But deep down, Ethan knew it wasn't just work draining him. It was life itself, or more precisely, the quiet void where love used to be. Michael had stopped asking how his day went months ago. Their apartment had become a museum of silence, 2 toothbrushes, 2 coffee cups, but only one conversation that never really began. Ethan had grown used to the soft hum of the refrigerator being the only thing that responded to him. That evening, when his vision dimmed and the world tilted beneath his feet, no one noticed at first. He fell forward, catching the edge of his desk before everything faded into a whisper. He awoke to the rhythmic beep of a monitor and the faint antiseptic scent of a hospital room. A gentle voice murmured nearby, low and steady, "Ethan Cole." He turned his head, blinking against the sterile light. A man stood beside his bed, a doctor, mid-30s perhaps, with calm gray eyes and sleeves rolled to his elbows. His badge read Dr. Liam Hart. "You fainted at your workplace," Liam said, his tone professional but softened by concern. "Dehydration, exhaustion, and, if I'm guessing right, stress." Ethan tried to speak, but his throat felt dry. He managed a weak smile. "You guessed right." Dr. Hart adjusted his movements practiced but unhurried. "You need rest, Mr. Cole. Not just a weekend off, but real rest." Ethan's voice came out as a whisper. "Please. I'm not feeling well. Go easy on me. I'm really exhausted." The words slipped out before he could stop them, too honest, too vulnerable. But instead of pity, Liam's face showed something else, understanding. He nodded slowly, his expression warm. "Then we'll take it slow." For a moment, silence settled between them, not awkward but strangely comforting. Liam checked his chart, then looked at Ethan again. "You've been pushing yourself for too long. Your body is asking for what your heart's been missing." Ethan didn't respond. He didn't need to. The doctor's words hit too close to home. Over the next 2 days, Ethan stayed under observation. The nurses came and went, but it was always Dr. Hart who seemed to appear at the right moments: morning check-ins, quiet conversations, a reassuring glance that lingered a second longer than necessary. He wasn't just performing his duty, he seemed to see Ethan. When Michael finally arrived at the hospital, Ethan felt an old ache resurface. Michael looked immaculate as ever, pressed shirt, a phone in his hand, eyes already scanning for the nearest exit. "You scared me," Michael said, leaning over him without touching. "They said you collapsed. What happened?" Ethan forced a small smile. "Just exhaustion. I'm fine." Michael nodded absently, his attention flicking to a work message. "You've got to start taking better care of yourself. You can't keep doing this." Ethan wanted to say "we can't keep doing this," but the words caught in his throat. Michael stayed 10 minutes before leaving. Another meeting, another excuse. After he left, Dr. Hart entered quietly, carrying a small chart. "Your partner?" he asked, careful with the phrasing. "Yes," Ethan replied. "Michael." Liam nodded once, his eyes unreadable. "He seems concerned." Ethan gave a faint, humorless laugh. "He's busy. Always has been." The doctor didn't press. Instead, he sat down on the chair beside the bed, folding his hands. "Sometimes people forget that presence matters more than words. I see it often, with patients, with families." Ethan watched him for a moment. "You talk like you've lived it." Liam smiled faintly. "Let's just say empathy comes from experience." It was the kind of answer that made Ethan want to ask more, but he didn't. It was easier to let silence speak for both of them. That evening, as the sun dipped below the window, painting the room gold, Liam came for his final rounds. He adjusted the monitor, checked the then paused. "You'll be discharged tomorrow," he said. "Try to take care of yourself outside these walls." Ethan nodded. "I'll try." Liam hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small card. "This is my direct number. If you ever feel unwell, physically or otherwise, you can call. Ethan took the card, reading the name, Dr. Liam Hart, Internal Medicine. The simplicity of it made his chest tighten. "Thank you," he said softly. When the doctor turned to leave, Ethan found himself speaking before he could stop. "Why do you care so much?" Liam paused at the doorway, half in shadow, half in light. "Because sometimes people need to be seen before they can heal," he replied. Then he was gone. Ethan stared at the card in his hand long after the door closed. He should have felt comforted, but instead, a strange energy stirred inside him, part gratitude, part confusion, part something else he couldn't name. The next morning, as he signed his discharge papers, the nurse handed him a sealed envelope. "From Dr. Hart," she said. Inside was a single note, written in neat handwriting. "Rest isn't weakness, Ethan. It's the beginning of strength." He folded the note carefully, tucking it into his wallet. Outside, the morning air was cool and bright. Michael's car was waiting at the curb, engine running, his face expressionless behind dark glasses. As Ethan climbed in, he glanced once at the hospital building through the side mirror. He caught a glimpse of a familiar figure near the window, Liam, clipboard in hand, watching as the car pulled away. Their eyes met for a fleeting second before the city swallowed the view. Ethan looked down at the doctor's card in his hand. It felt warm, almost alive. He didn't know why he was still holding onto it, or why part of him didn't want to let go. The city blurred past the window, and for the first time in months, Ethan felt something other than numbness. He couldn't name it yet, but it pulsed quietly in his chest, an awakening that both frightened and comforted him. Whatever it was, it had begun in that hospital room, with a voice that told him to rest, and eyes that seemed to understand everything he hadn't dared to say. The days after Ethan's discharge blurred into a gray rhythm of routine and restlessness. His body felt better, but his mind kept circling back to the hospital, the quiet room, the doctor's calm voice, and the folded note tucked in his wallet like a secret. Every time he opened it, he read the words again, "Rest isn't weakness. It's the beginning of strength." It wasn't just advice, it felt like someone had seen right through him. Michael, on the other hand, had grown even more distant. He spoke in short sentences, as though conversation was a chore. When Ethan tried to talk about the hospital, Michael only nodded absently, eyes fixed on his phone. "I'm glad you're fine," he said once. "Try not to overthink it." The words landed like cold rain. 3 weeks later, Ethan found himself outside the clinic again. He told himself it was just a follow-up, just being responsible, but even he didn't believe that. His palms were slightly damp as he waited at the reception desk. When Dr. Liam Hart finally appeared, Ethan felt his chest ease, as if his body had been holding its breath. "Mr. Cole," Liam greeted, that same calm smile returning. "Back already?" "Just wanted to make sure I'm really okay," Ethan said. "You told me to rest, and I actually listened, for once." Liam chuckled softly. "I should add that to my record. A patient who follows instructions." The examination was brief, ordinary. But afterward, Liam didn't immediately leave. Instead, he leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "You look lighter," he said. "Did something change?" Ethan hesitated. "Not really. Maybe I just stopped pretending everything's fine." "That's a start," Liam said quietly. "Pretending is more exhausting than any job." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a small recognition, a flicker of shared weariness. As Ethan got up to leave, Liam said, "If you ever want to talk, not as a patient, but as a person, I'm here." Ethan nodded, managing a small smile. "I might take you up on that." And he did. Over the following weeks, Ethan began dropping by the clinic during lunch breaks or after work. Sometimes he brought coffee, sometimes he just sat in the waiting area until Liam's shift ended. Their conversations were never forced. They talked about art, about what music helped them think, about how strange it was to grow up learning to please everyone but yourself. Liam spoke sparingly about his life, enough to reveal traces of solitude. His parents lived in another state, and he admitted he'd been through a breakup last year. "People assume doctors have their lives together," he said once, glancing out the window. "But we just hide it better." Ethan smiled sadly. "Guess we both hide well." It wasn't romance yet, not exactly. It was something quieter, two people leaning toward warmth after too much cold. There were moments, though, when the silence between them felt fragile, dangerous. A brush of fingers when passing a coffee cup. A shared laugh that lingered too long. At home, things were unraveling. Michael came in late, his explanations vague. Ethan didn't ask anymore, he just noted the unfamiliar scent on Michael's shirt and the way he turned his phone face down. One night, while clearing the table, Ethan noticed a message flash across the screen, "Miss you already." The name wasn't saved, his first reaction wasn't anger but clarity. Whatever they'd built was already gone. That weekend, Ethan went for a walk to clear his head. Rain began to fall, light at first, then heavier. He was near the clinic when headlights flashed across the street. A car slowed beside him. Liam's voice called out through the open window, "You'll catch a cold walking like that. Get in." Ethan hesitated only a second before sliding into the passenger seat. The air inside smelled faintly of rain and mint. Neither spoke as the wipers beat a steady rhythm. "You okay?" Liam asked at last. Ethan exhaled. "Not really. But I'm trying." They stopped at a red light. The glow from the street lamps flickered across Liam's face, calm, careful, human. "You don't have to be okay all the time," he said. "You just have to be honest." Something in Ethan broke then. The words spilled out, how Michael had grown distant, how he felt invisible, how the loneliness had settled in like a second skin. Liam didn't interrupt. He just listened, the way few people ever did. When Ethan finished, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It felt like being held without touch. Liam turned toward him, his voice soft. "Ethan, you deserve to be with someone who doesn't make you feel small." The traffic light changed, but neither of them moved. Ethan looked out the window, rain streaking the glass like blurred tears. "You shouldn't say things like that," he whispered. "Why not?" "Because it feels like something I could start believing." Liam's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Then maybe you should." For a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them thickened, humming with everything neither dared to say. Finally, Liam drove on. He stopped in front of Ethan's building, the rain still falling in steady sheets. Ethan didn't reach for the door handle right away. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For listening. For seeing me." Liam looked at him, eyes unreadable. "Sometimes that's all someone needs, to be seen." Ethan's throat tightened. "It's strange. I barely know you, but it feels familiar," Liam finished, his voice barely above a whisper. They sat there, caught in that fragile stillness, until the rain softened into a drizzle. Ethan finally stepped out, the night air cool against his face. He turned back, meeting Liam's gaze through the half-open window. "Good night, Dr. Hart." "Good night, Ethan." As the car pulled away, the reflection of taillights shimmered on the wet pavement like fading embers. Ethan stood there until they disappeared around the corner. Upstairs, the apartment was dark. Michael was home but asleep on the couch, his phone resting loosely in his hand. Ethan set his keys down quietly and watched him for a moment. There was no anger left, only distance. That he went to his room, sat on the edge of the bed, and took out the note from his wallet once again. "Rest isn't weakness." The words had changed meaning now. Maybe rest wasn't just about the body, it was about letting go of what no longer nurtured you. Outside, thunder rumbled softly, rolling through the city like a quiet warning. Ethan lay back, eyes open in the dim light, aware of the new truth forming within him. It wasn't love yet, not with Liam, not with anyone, but it was something close to hope, and that was more than he'd had in a long time. That he didn't know what came next. But for the first time, he wanted to find out. Morning sunlight spilled through tall windows, painting the room in quiet gold. Eli blinked awake, momentarily disoriented by the warmth of the blanket and the scent of brewed coffee floating through the air. For a fleeting moment, he thought he was home again, before the memory returned like a slow bruise. He sat up, his reflection caught in the mirror across the room, a stranger in borrowed comfort. Outside the door, the low murmur of a man's voice drifted from the kitchen. Daniel Cross moved with the ease of someone used to control, every gesture deliberate, precise. He glanced up as Eli stepped hesitantly into view. "Morning," Daniel said, setting down his tablet. I wasn't sure how you take your coffee, so I guessed. Hope black isn't too cruel a choice. Eli managed a small smile. Black's fine. Thank you. He wrapped his hands around the cup, grateful for the warmth, but unsure what to do with the silence that followed. The apartment was sleek but not cold, modern lines softened by books, sketches, and a faint scent of cedarwood. It felt lived in, though meticulously so. Daniel leaned against the counter, studying him without judgment. You slept nearly 10 hours, he said lightly. That's a good sign. I didn't mean to, Eli murmured. I should probably go. You've already done enough. Daniel shook his head. You don't owe me an apology. If you want to leave, I'll drive you. But if you need a few days to get your bearings, you can stay here. There's work I could use help with, sorting digital files, that sort of thing. You'd earn something, not charity. The word work steadied Eli more than he expected. I could do that, he said quietly. At least until I figure things out. Good, Daniel replied with a faint smile. Then let's start with breakfast. Real breakfast. You look like you haven't had one in weeks. The meal was simple: eggs, toast, and conversation that wandered cautiously between small talk and silence. Eli learned that Daniel ran a private investment firm, that he built it young and kept mostly to himself. He spoke in a calm, unhurried way that drew trust without asking for it. Over the next few days, Eli settled into a rhythm. He worked from the home office, organizing client files, drafting notes, sometimes just listening to music through Daniel's old speakers. Daniel moved through the house like quiet weather, always composed, rarely still. Yet beneath the composure, Eli sensed a loneliness that mirrored his own. On the fifth evening, the front door opened with the sharp sound of keys, and the air changed. A man entered, tall, polished, his expression coolly assessing. His gaze found Eli first, lingering just long enough to register irritation. Who's this? He asked, setting his briefcase down. Daniel looked up from the couch. Aaron, this is Eli. He's helping me with some projects this week. Aaron's smile didn't reach his eyes. I see. You've hired an assistant without telling me. It's temporary, Daniel said evenly. Eli needed a place to stay. It costs me nothing to help. Eli stood awkwardly, unsure whether to shake hands or disappear. Aaron gave a small nod, polite, dismissive, then turned to Daniel. We'll talk later. He left the room, and the quiet that followed was heavier than before. Daniel exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple. Don't mind him, he said softly. He's protective. Your partner? Eli asked before he could stop himself. Daniel nodded. We've been together a few years. It's complicated. Eli said nothing more, but the word complicated stayed with him. The days passed differently after that. Aaron was gone most mornings, but when he was home, tension filled the air like static. Eli often caught fragments of arguments, whispered words through closed doors, the sharp edges of frustration. He pretended not to hear. One afternoon, Daniel joined him in the study, both working in silence until Daniel's voice broke through. You remind me of myself at your age, he said quietly. Trying to seem braver than you feel. Eli looked up, startled by the gentleness in his tone. You don't seem afraid of much. Daniel smiled faintly. That's because I've learned how to hide it. They spoke for hours after that, about fear, family, the strange loneliness that came from not fitting into the shapes others expected. Eli found himself drawn to Daniel's stillness, the way his voice could turn warmth into safety. There was nothing romantic in their words, but the air between them carried an undercurrent neither of them acknowledged. By the end of the week, Aaron's patience had thinned. He came home early one evening to find Daniel and Eli laughing over old records. The sound froze him in the doorway. So this is what you do when I'm gone, he said sharply. Daniel rose, calm but weary. Don't start. I'm not starting, Aaron shot back. I'm asking why there's a teenager living in our guest room and sharing dinner with you every night. I'm 18, Eli said softly, though his voice trembled. Aaron turned his glare on him. I wasn't asking you. Daniel's jaw tightened. Enough. Eli stays until he finds his footing. That's all. Aaron laughed, bitterly. You're playing savior again, Daniel. You always need someone to fix, because fixing people keeps you from fixing yourself. The words landed hard. Eli wanted to disappear. Instead, Daniel said quietly, You're tired, Aaron. Maybe we both are. Aaron didn't reply. He left the room, the slam of the door echoing through the apartment. Eli sat frozen. I should go, he whispered. I didn't mean to cause trouble. Daniel's expression softened. You didn't. Aaron and I have been unraveling for a long time. You just happened to arrive at the end of it. He looked away then, staring at the city lights beyond the window. When two people stop hearing each other, he said, silence becomes the only language left. Eli didn't know what to say. He wanted to comfort him, to thank him, to stay silent all at once. But words felt too fragile for the space between them. The night wore on. Daniel retreated to his room. Eli returned to the guest bed that no longer felt quite safe. Through the wall, he could hear faint voices, an argument breaking into quiet sobs, then nothing. Sometime after midnight, footsteps approached his door. Daniel's voice came softly through the wood. Eli. Are you awake? Yes. I just wanted you to know, I meant what I said. You have nothing to feel guilty for. Some things were ending long before you arrived. Eli hesitated, then replied, Thank you. For everything. He heard Daniel exhale, a sound halfway between relief and exhaustion. Then footsteps receded, and the apartment returned to silence. Eli lay staring into the darkness, his chest tight with emotions he couldn't name. Gratitude, confusion, maybe something more dangerous. He knew he should leave soon, that staying would tangle him in someone else's heartbreak, but the thought of walking away felt unbearable. He turned toward the window, watching the reflection of city lights shimmer across the glass. Somewhere down the hall, a door closed softly. The sound was small but final, like the end of something just beginning. Sleep eluded him. The warmth of Daniel's kindness lingered, tangled with guilt and longing. In the stillness, Eli realized that kindness could be as intoxicating as love, and just as dangerous.